Hello and welcome to A Conversation with Rad. And I am your host, Radcliffe. And today we're diving into some captivating discussion where every episode will bring you fresh insight, inspiring stories, and candid conversation. A few things we'll be discussing today: lifelong friendship, career journeys, connection that shape our lives, and of course, a journey down memory lane, Buff State, that is.
All right.
So, without further ado, let me bring in my first guest, Anthony Curry, which, from the Brotherhood is known as Okie. So we'll go through the session with Okie. But for all the other listening audience out there, Mr. Curry. And
Thank
again,
you.
Mr. Curry was one of them, the founding member of the bar, the Black Alumni Reunion,
Yes, indeed.
a group that inspired, our start in Buffalo. And, if I were to go back to Buffalo, there's things that we bring up about Buffalo. And one of the greatest thing about Buffalo, I think, and Uki will kind of address this later, but he met us First Lady Gina at a party where if you need to know who is who of the Brotherhood, this is where you go. Hey, Oki, thank you for joining today.
All right. It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. I know we discussed it during our Saturday evening Zoom, so I'm glad it's finally come to fruition. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be your first guest. I appreciate it.
Listen, don't tell the other brothers that you're the first one, but I'm sure they'll hear about it once they listen to the discussion.
Right. That's true. That's true. So true.
So where I want to start is, let's start off by, sharing with everyone a little thing about yourself, where you're calling in from, maybe a fun fact about, life, unexpected, journey and stuff like that. So let's just start out there. Where you calling in from?
I'm calling in from the lovely borough of Queens, New York.
Woohoo!
Yes, I've been in Queens for.
Hold on, because a lot of listeners out there, you know, will be from Queens, so we got to give them some bigger.
That's right. That's right. Hey, we got the home of hip hop legends. We got Tribe, we got LL, Run DMC. You know, I know I'm forgetting a few, but hey, those are the locals, like right around the corner from where I am. So I have to shout them out.
Hey, if you didn't big up LL, I'd probably just end the cast right about now. But I'm just being biased.
Okay, okay. So yeah, a little bit about me. I go back. I was born in Buffalo, and I traveled back and forth from Buffalo down south, Buffalo to down south. My family originated from the south in Georgia. I still have family in Georgia. My mom is still in Buffalo. Went to Buff State, as Rad mentioned. That's where the Brotherhood originated, Buff State, and it was a great experience. I learned a lot from each individual that's in the Brotherhood, and as I was going through my adulthood, I learned to you know become independent. Of course, people skills were important because it was very diverse. Um, and I met a lot of very interesting people, and I'm glad to say I'm still friends with a few of those people.
And that is great because that friendship, and we will dive into that friendship as well, because that friendship goes back a good over 30 years. So, you know, not a lot of people can say that,
Yes.
so, but it really, it's amazing, we can catch up after so many years. I said 30 years, but it's really amazing that we can catch up and talk about where we've been, where we are, our journey, and stuff like that.
Yes, I agree, and I'm sure we'll touch on this. I guess the reconnecting of the brotherhood. And I see this with I guess our culture. And I see a lot of you reconnect with your people during certain sad times, quote unquote, funerals, and, my experience has been with family, you reconnect for those few hours or those couple of days, and then you just, split off again and you go your own separate ways. But with this brotherhood, it seems like it's been consistent and it's been genuine, and it's been a space where I think, you know, us as, black men can come together and just, reminisce, and then think about the future and share our stories, that we put together when we were apart. So that was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, definitely 100, because all the brothers in the brotherhood today, are doing different things from different walks of this country, and we have a common story, where we step back to Buffalo, and that's where it all started, So speaking of, where we started, let's step back to Buffalo. You
Mhm.
know, there there's been a lot of stories, that over the years, and we just started, this conversation probably a few months ago, right? When we lost one of our brothers, and we said, you know what, we need to keep this going.
Yes.
So there's a lot of stories that have been shared, back in Buffalo. You know, those those infamous parties at Trev.
Yes.
But that's kind of where it began, right?
Yeah.
We started in Buffalo, and we're here today. We have
Mhm.
brothers who are in Florida, New York,
Yes.
all region of the country, and you'll hear about those and hear from those brothers from those regions as well.
Yes.
But
Yes.
let's jump back to Buffalo a little bit. What was it like, getting together with those brothers?
It was, again, being from Buffalo and Buff State not being far from where I grew up in Buffalo, you know, and saying that it was far, because my mom was really like protective, young black man, in Buffalo and its history. When I did leave home and became independent, living on campus and meeting those brothers, it was it was something because I was unsure of myself. I was trying to find my niche and find out who I am and, where I was going and what this college life was about. And just connecting with these brothers, it just made the transition a little easier, meeting Claudel, from Long Island, or, and then, or from Amityville,
Which you will be hearing from eventually.
yes, you know, and meeting Claudel and, you know, just watching how, you know, people maneuvered, like figuring things out, going to parties, really not having any restraints. It was you being free, being able to do certain things and, connecting with those brothers. And it just made me, you know, a little more at ease because I was surrounded by people that looked like me, that had a familiar background. And on the opposite side, had a different background. To learn from them and how they moved and maneuvered. So, just being around people that were headed in the same direction, trying to find themselves, trying to figure this thing out, what we call life is. It was a great adventure, and I remember when people started graduating and leaving because they found their way and they met their significant other, and they started leaving. It was like, wow, that was another adjustment you had to make. So it was, definitely meeting those brothers and learning from them. It made my transition into adulthood, a little easier.
And I mean, as you said, it was good. All these brothers were very goal oriented, right? They were positive brothers. They find ways to show you who they are, where they're going, and which helps build each one of us.
Yes, yes. It was I was able to be myself. You know what I mean? You didn't have to try to be who you weren't. I was one of them individuals where, you know, not to be phony. It was important for me to be who I am and who I was and not to be, someone that was unoriginal. And those brothers accepted who you were. We played a lot of sports together. So that was another connecting factor. You know what I mean? Everybody had a different dress styles. But everybody, you might have got joked on, but it was all love. You know what I mean? And
Going in the
you
same
found
direction.
so, you know, I mean, I have so many stories, man. Like you said in the beginning of the podcast, that we share our stories, every Saturday, and it's like it's always a new story, or it might be the same story with a different twist to it. So and it's always refreshing to hear. Like, wow, okay, okay. So, I mean, this is something that definitely is going to go down, and hopefully, and with your your insight in you having the just the wherewithal to say, you know what, this has to be captured. You know, that's saying a lot for you and who you are. And I really appreciate it because it just could have been conversations on Saturdays, and even though we record some of them, but it just would have been recorded and not shared, and being digested, and being, I guess, we're pushing it in another direction where this might be shown and other people might see it, and have an idea of recording and sharing their stories. So my hat goes off to you. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Rad.
I mean, it was a conversation and something that's after hearing the stories, as you said, I just couldn't let it go. I couldn't let it just happen on a Saturday and then goes nowhere else, because we have people that will learn from some of the things that we have done,
Mm,
and
mhm.
stuff like that. So it would be selfish of us to just keep it to ourselves, because
Yes.
everyone on that Saturday call is, we're positive. We talk about politics, we talk about, finance, we talk
Yes.
about health and wellness,
Yes.
you know, we go across the gambit,
Yes.
so it would be selfish of us to just keep it to ourselves. So I appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So again, we're gonna stay in memory lane, but we're gonna shift a little bit, because over our Saturday conversation, and you mentioned it, that we meet at a certain time for wedding, funerals, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And last year we lost one of our brothers, one of the glue to the group, Tennyson Lewis.
Yes.
So I don't want to just gloss through and not talk about or ask you and everyone else, what does Tennyson mean? And I'm using it in the present, right? I could have said, what did Tennyson mean, to you? But I think with his spirit, still resonating through us, I'm using the present term. So is there a memory? And let's go back first to Buffalo, because again, all of this is going to come right back around to
Yes.
Buffalo.
Yes.
Is there a memory you can invoke of Tennyson, how he was with the group?
How long is this podcast? Listen, man. When I said that, you know, individuals had an impact on my adulthood and growing into myself. Tennyson was the first. He was one of the first brothers I met, on campus. He was what do you call it?
Was he?
Public
Was it an
safety,
essay?
safety assistant.
Yeah, public. Yes.
And listen, man, when I tell you this brother, man, he took his job serious, and I never forget, because back then, and I'm not sure in colleges if they still do it now, but being part of the program, I was in the EOP program, and we with us, they gave us,
I'm not interrupting, but you can't just gloss over EOP without giving a big up to EOP, because again,
hey, yo, EOP, I mean, equal opportunity program was what it's what it is, man. I mean, and it brought so you know what, and I'm gonna divert a little bit. I thought, like, I was like, man, I'm the only one in this program, because it seemed to me it had like a stigma to it, like, man, you're in the EOP program, right? But I'm like, man, I'm the only one in the program like that, because certain factors came with being in the EOP program, so, and I met all the factors, the financial factor, the home, the home factor with one parent, the grade factor, your high school grades, all that. I just checked all the boxes. So it was something for me. So that was something I had to deal with. But getting back to Tennyson, he was one of those people that I met because we were able to come on campus, I believe 3 weeks before campus really opened to give us, that feeling or that presence of what campus life or college life is. So Tennyson was there. And again, he was public safety and he would check the doors and check the dorms and make sure everything was up to par and we were doing what we were supposed to be doing and not doing what we weren't supposed to be doing. And like I said, he took his job very seriously. And what I learned from Tennyson was it was okay to be yourself and to be who you are. Because Tennyson was, he lived by it was Tennyson. He didn't try to be phony. He didn't try to put on any airs. He was just who he was. And I was like, wow, okay. It's okay to be who you are. You know what I mean? Because he accepted everyone. You know what I mean? He didn't have favoritism. He just did his job, you know what I mean? And he made sure that, us freshmen, were okay. He always said, listen, if you have any questions or anything, you know, contact me, ask me. I'm like, wow, okay, that's cool. You know what I mean? Again, new to this, being away from home, you know what I mean? Not knowing what to expect. Tennyson was always there, and he always made sure, and me and Jean, my wife, who I met at
The first lady.
yeah, the first lady who I met at Trevor's apartment, one of his parties. We talk about Tennyson and how he always made sure that the ladies made it home safe. And that was something about him. You know what I mean? He always looked out for others. And I really appreciated that, man, because Tennyson he was real, and that's what I respected about him. He was real. He was the great. I mean, sarcasm times 100. You know what I mean? This dude was. I was like, is he being for real? Is he being sarcastic? I don't know. So he made you think. You know what I mean? And I'm like, wow. He made you think about things. And, I really appreciate that. And
That is Tennyson, though.
yes,
You mentioned that he will make sure that your college experience is what it should be, the best of what it should be. And again, I came in a little bit late, and because I think I came in 3 years after you guys. I came in '89,
okay.
and some reason there was a party. I can't remember which street it was.
Yeah.
There was a party, and Tennyson, again, we were young. We couldn't buy alcohol at alcohol on Forest. That
Yes.
what is it called?
It was Wilson Farms.
Wilson Farm. So we know we can't get anything. And we got into that party, just mentioning Tennyson's name. I think there was like three of us. 'Cause as you said, we came in an EOP program,
Uh-huh.
and we were still wet behind the ear. We didn't know anyone.
Mhm.
Met up with Tennyson, and again, I was there, and nobody knew that my brother was actually in the school
Mm.
because I didn't say anything to him. I wanted to be my own person,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And so Tennyson came along and showed us, okay, how to navigate certain things, which was great,
Yes.
because not everybody took the time out to say, okay, I see a new brother or sister here. Let me kind of help them find their way a little bit. So that was one of the great thing about Tennyson, you know,
True. Man,
and
that's so
definitely,
true.
definitely, he will be missed, and you said, how, he brought people together. And up until today, you mentioned we have our conversations on Saturdays, so let's jump into that for just a few minutes.
Uh-huh.
you know, when we lost them, we said we have to keep this going. We have to have these conversations for Tennyson. We have to have it because this is what he would want.
Yes.
We wanted to put I think, a trip together to Buffalo to remember Tennyson. So jump into that a little bit as far as our conversations we have every Saturday at 6 p.m. That's supposed to go for 20 minutes, but last 5, 6 hours.
Hey, you said it. It's a beautiful thing, man, because when we gather on Saturdays, as you said, at 6 p.m., I think it gives, well, I know it gives us, us a chance to, depress from the week, share our stories with each other, talk about family, and we have a, we have a granddad on the show. I won't say who it is, but it's amazing. It's to be in communion with the brothers in this centralized, space, and talk about, what can we do to get together, not only via Zoom, but physically together. So we came up with the idea that, as to pay homage to Tennyson, the next Buff State homecoming, which is in October, we will get together, as a group, have lunch, breakfast, lunch, visit certain places. Canada is only an hour away. So we came together, and we're still coming together. We're putting together a package, or a package, so we can, spend time together, physically, and just, and draw off each other's energy, you know what I mean? And just, chop it up in real time, you know, face to face instead of, via Zoom. It's something, it's in progress. Everyone's looking forward to it, and I think it'll be, a start of something. Again, things happen for a reason, and losing our brother Tennyson, has, brought us together. And that's who Tennyson was, he
Yes,
brought people together,
yes,
and it's amazing, this is what it is. Tennyson brought us together this way. And it's a beautiful thing that, again, we sit down and we're planning, this reunion together in October. And, and who knows where it's going to go from there, what's going to happen. I think we learned that from Tennyson's passing, that it's not, you know, about waiting for, someone to transition, that we have to get together. You know what I mean? So
yes.
again, I look forward to those Saturdays. Saturdays come by so fast. It's amazing, right? It's amazing how fast Saturday comes.
And we look forward to those Saturdays.
Yes,
We look
we do.
forward to those Saturdays.
Yes.
I must say, my first lady, I normally say Saturday at 6 is my time. I hope she's not listening to this
That's
one.
right. That's right. And like you said, we say six, it starts at 6. The longest Zoom we had was just a few weeks ago, and it was until 2 in the morning. And I'm like, we put in an 8-hour shift. You know what I mean? But that's the beauty of it. You know what I mean? That's when time goes by, like they say, time goes by when you're having fun. But we really, to a certain extent, we expose ourselves. And we have some of the brothers get on, and they talk about how it really is impactful that they are able to have this space. So yeah, man, them Saturdays at 6, man, it's a beautiful thing, man. I'm running through the house. I'm trying to finish up with housework. Anything I got to do, I'm up in the morning. I'm doing it. Be here. Yeah, it's truly a blessing. Truly a blessing.
Definitely is. So I'd like to pivot just a little bit. We've come so far, right? Over 30 years. You guys, probably 40. I'm still in my 40s for the podcast. My government documents say something else. But for all the brothers, I'm still in my 40s, so I'm the youngin',
Okay.
right?
Okay. You're the host. That's not. You're the host. Like,
So I can have AI put that in there for me, so I can do what I want.
that's right.
So again, just to pivot a little bit, we're in our adulthood now, parents and stuff like that. I wanted to talk a little bit about our career journey because I know we're always forward-looking brothers, and so I just wanted to just a slight touch, the path and where it got us to where we are today. So if you
Wow,
want to
that's
start,
great. When I mentioned before that, brothers started going off, graduating, going their ways, something. Excuse me. Something I always told myself before I went to Buff State. I always said, I am leaving Buffalo. That was my own, I'm leaving Buffalo. And, my journey to Buff State, graduating with a history degree, you know, started off with a social work, and someone disparaged me and was like, there's no money in social work. I'm like, wow, okay. So I went to, I was intrigued with history and, and again, not knowing how to navigate the waters and not really seeking out advice from my elders. I was, my focus was graduate. Well, whatever happened after graduation, it happened, right? I got, when I said I checked all the boxes in high school, it was just, high school was easy, because I wasn't a disruptive kid, you know what I mean? So they just, and again, I'm sure people could probably relate to this. Buffalo, has this history of racism and being a black kid and having your mom shelter you and trying to keep you away from all of that stuff, not knowing the nuances of racism, being in a class where, majority of 99% of your teachers are white, you, you, uh, you go and you just go through the motions, and until you get to a certain point where something starts to click and you start to see things and you start to put things in perspective and like, whoa, okay, wow, this is what it is. And I remember, I never forget this going to Buff State my freshman year on Grand Street. There was a store on the corner. I can't remember the cross street, but there was a store and it was abandoned. But on the door was peeling, a sign was peeling, covering of the sign. And it said no Negroes allowed, right? I'm like, the heck? There's stuff like that I just read about in the book. I never thought I would see a sign like that. Again, being sheltered and being, not introduced to that stuff. Okay, well, they ain't talking about me. Again, being naive. I was like, okay. And, going to Buff State, having someone say, or having a white person say, go back to Africa. I'm like, what? Where am I? Like, I'm like, am I in a time machine? I'm like, but I turn around and look like, well, who's this he's talking about? Me again, it's just being exposed to these certain things, but not being naive and not okay. You know, it just helped me again. Wanted to, leave Buffalo, and again, however I had to leave, I was leaving. And again, and my focus wasn't on a career; it was just like graduating. And I take my hat off in case he sees this. The Fadri, Fadri was the one who came to my high school, and which was South Park High School, and he told me he said, "What are you doing when you graduate?" I was like, "Man, I just want to graduate. What am I doing?" I was like, again, I'm like, I'm going to graduate. He's like, "Well, what's the next step? You can go into the armed forces, or we have Buff State here, and we talked about college." I'm like, college or school? I'm like, "Jeez, like, when does this end?" So I then he said the service, and I knew I wasn't going to fight anyway. I'm like, 'cause my first thing popped in my mind was military, fighting war. I'm like, nah, that ain't for me. Sign me up. Let's go Buff State. And then there's my interest in Buff State. So my hat goes off to Fadri, who's been an integral part, of my life because he's touched my brother's lives, and that's a whole other story. But Fadri was definitely one of the black men that I came across and that played a very influential part of my life. So hats off to Fadri. So my journey to when I graduated, you know, um, I have to bring in, the first lady a bit because the first lady, um,
So you
she
didn't initially came to New York, right? Where you
right
are in the wonderful city of Queens,
of
right?
Queens, where my queen, my first lady is from, born and raised in Queens. How
Jesus,
ironic is that, right?
I feel like I just want to start singing, "Coming to America."
Facts, facts. I'm telling you. I mean, she's from Queens, my queen from Queens, and it's like wow, and yeah, man, that's a whole another story. But she was, man, I can't say enough about what she has done, and keeping me focused and grounded. Seeing her work ethic because she had a plan. And she was one of those um women and is to this day who who spoke up. And she speaks up a lot, but she was one of them women, that certain things that we ran into when we first met. We wanted to get an apartment together, and she went, and it was okay. And then when she came, it was time for me to go see the apartment. All of a sudden, the apartment was sold. You know what I mean? And it was like, what is going on here? Again, that racism part, where the place has been sold. And this happened a couple of times. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And Gene was like, well, okay, well, that's not going to stop what's going on. And again, my upbringing, being sheltered from all of this was like, man, this is incredible. This was a whole nother part of, of society that I was like, that was new to me. So, she helped me get through and navigate this, college life, courses and, paying attention to what you're doing, not just trying to get through it, but to actually gain something from it. So, it, she, like I said, integral part, and she graduated with her, journalism degree and did her thing for a few years. And lo and behold, Queen's called, you know, meaning her mom's reached out, the restaurant business is going pretty good. What are your plans?
To the restaurant. You were at a place that I like visiting that has a three-letter word. Do you want to talk about that first? Because I think before the restaurant, right? Weren't you at the NBA first?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I was at the NBA, but so I'll speed it up a little bit. When I came to New York, I was in the restaurant business. So I was working in the restaurant. That was my, the family business, right? I'm like, okay, and I loved it, because it was again a family business. I'm like, wow. And again, not being exposed or people saying, listen, it's okay to be an entrepreneur. I was in it, like, wow, they own this. So that was another eye opener for me. Like, man, this is actually theirs. They own this. So that was a beautiful thing to learn the insides or the inner workings of being a part of a family business, and you making decisions on how it should be ran, you know, and it was hard. And oh man, it's hard, right? I'm gonna fast forward to the NBA, right? Because when I say, I was like, man, okay, you got to find out you graduated with a college degree. All right, what you gonna do with it, right? So I said, I want to explore what can I do with this degree. Before the MBA, I went into teaching, right? And not a lot of people know this. I was teaching and I was loving it because it was all kids that, that looked like me and I could relate to. And it was a beautiful thing because I didn't have that. It was white teachers. And so the way the kids responded when they saw me enter the classroom, it blew my mind. So I'm like, wow. And then you start doing research about the school system and what it is, and you find out that the lack of black male teachers in the school system, and and start putting two and two together to see why these kids were gravitating towards me. It was something, and I'm like, wow, I love this. This is what it is. But again, racism is not I guess is not stuck, or for lack of better words, it's not just for one place. Racism is worldwide. And again, I didn't know this, but racism reared its ugly head, you know, and I found myself in a position where I had to make a choice about, teaching and, you know, something else. So I'm not one, I don't like, I guess, quote unquote, playing the game. If something's wrong, it's something I don't agree with, I like to just address it. But like, it's funny, President Trump said to Zelensky, as we saw, there's a game. And if you don't play the game, either you in or out. And there's rules that has to be followed, and I didn't agree with the rules, again, because I saw myself in these kids and I saw teachers doing things that I didn't agree with. So you got to make a choice, and my choice is it was for these kids I saw, and that wasn't the right route, for them. So, again, you label. So I got labeled and I was like, you know what, this is not for me. I let that get my emotions carry me out of there. NBA store. I was like, I got to do something. So I had to find something to do. I hit the NBA store. I went there. Like, wow, blew my mind. Yeah, it's a different world. I mean, you go in here because the NBA as a whole organization, it's great. I mean, you see the who's in the NBA, who makes the NBA really tick, you know, and so they take care of their people. And David Stern, who was he's passed away, but he was the commissioner at the time. He had a great idea to open up a store, but not only a store, it's a destination, you know, and would be a place where people from all over the world can come because the NBA the brand was so big and still growing. It was a great idea, and being a part of that, I saw millionaires, that the star athletes come in, and I saw how businesses, corporate businesses, how they work. And again, the NBA being inclusive to African Americans, Black folks, was something to me that I was like, okay, I like this, So my antennas went up, and I was like, oh man, this is great. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. And I mean, I met not one to be, and I get it. People will like athletes and like the stars, but I'm not starstruck. I'm so glad that I'm not a starstruck individual. You know what I mean? Because listen, I'm like, listen, I play basketball, not to that level. I'm like, but you dribbling the ball and he's shooting. You know what I mean? I'm like, you just happen to be 6'2", 6'3", 7 feet tall. You know what I mean? And you get paid for it, but you still you like me. You know what I mean? You eat, breathe, walk, talk. So I never let that got to me, and I appreciated the guys, the athletes that come in the store, and being able to have conversations with those guys, like regular conversations, because they get treated in such a way that you know, it's like they want to be a regular person, but they can't be because what comes with it. So having conversations with those guys, man, was great. And that led me to another world of networking with people, corporate world, and seeing how things run. And again, there's a game to be played, and it's always a game to be played.
You gotta play the game.
You gotta play the game. And Gene told me, I, I'm not built like that. I can't do it. And I'm not, and again, when I mentioned earlier that I'm not phony and I like being myself, and I learned that I have to be myself. I can't be one. That's just not who I am. So, I hit a certain plateau. And if you're not willing, again, like you mentioned, play the game, you have to make a decision. And there's my other decision to make. There's always a crossroad. You know what I mean? It's a crossroad. So I left the NBA, you know, and the beautiful thing is, being in that retail sector. The beautiful thing is, and I didn't know this, not being told, but Caucasian guy, right? He's the first general manager of the NBA store. And he wasn't from the corporate office. They pulled him from Los Angeles. And this dude, right? When I tell you, he didn't have he just, you know, he had experience running retail, but he wasn't about the numbers. He was just about, all right, everybody here on time. All right, that's it. That's what it is. I'm like, man, okay, this is all you got. Oh, well, this dude making six figures. He's not breaking down on numbers. He just coming in, again, it's a business. So when they started breaking down numbers and they saw how big this thing could be, they started putting it on like, listen, we trying to reach 30 million. This is what the goal is. We got to pay attention to, to all the variables and we got to make sure customer service and we got to make sure this and it's not just a destination store anymore. It's about money. Now it changed. The whole thing changed. It was about the money because they saw what they could do. They saw the revenue they can bring in. My goodness. You ain't willing to play the game, they gonna let you go. You got a decision to make. So again, he exited, and I learned something because a lot of sports brands came into the store and were picking ideas, asking questions like, "Wow, how did you guys do this? What's some of the ins and outs, the inner workings of this?" And I was like, "Man, we had the NFL commissioner coming in, we had wrestling commissioner, Vince McMahon, all these guys were coming in asking questions." I'm like, "Oh, this is something." Again, the NBA is a starting point for a lot of things, and I was fortunate enough to be around people, you know what I mean, that would give good, great advice. And the gentleman I was speaking about, who the first general manager of the store, he was approached by World Wrestling Federation. They pulled him in to listen, we want to do the same thing. We want to, do the same thing the NBA is doing. So he tapped me. He's like, listen, I got an opportunity for you. I'm like, another decision to make. Like, but that's life, and that's life, and just from there, he wanted to pull me in. I had to negotiate, and all this stuff is new, like negotiating these numbers, like what, like gee, I'm sitting down like, what's going on? Again, not having that inner circle to say, listen, this is how you negotiate. This is what you do. I had to make a decision. I'm like, whew, nope. So I stayed with the NBA because the NBA had a history.
Yeah, it was.
Right. They didn't have a history. You know what I mean? So I had to weigh the pros. And so I had to really put on my big boy pants and think about, this world like, oh, okay, this is what it is, which is a beautiful thing. Fast forward, going through navigating the retail and the corporate America, you know what? I hit a point where I was like, uh, this can't be what life is about. I get in my inflection point, I had a conversation with myself. It's like, oh, something else. It has to be something else. And of course, I spoke with Gene about it, you know, and I was like, I got to get stuff in order, because there's something else that I want to do. There's something else out there. This just can't be it. So, and that's, there's some other things I could go on for a couple hours, but I'm at a point where, again, back to when I first came to Queens, going back to the family business, my eyes started focusing on how important it is that this family business is here, and it's been around for 30 plus years. So, that's where I am now. I was able to, kind of. Gene said, "Oh, you're retired." I don't even use that as a. I don't believe in retirement. That's just me and my thing. I don't believe in, that's another word people use. Yeah, I'm like, I don't believe in that. But, it's like, it's not that, it's just that I'm not going, thank God, I don't want to go back into that place or put myself in that position, which is nothing's wrong with it. But again, for me, each individual have to make a choice. You know, you make your own decisions and you do certain things. As I was raised, go to school, get your degree, get your job, retire, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know the other thing you could do and do this stuff until again I came here, Queens, and it was introduced to family business. So that's where it is right now. I'm in a place where in Queens and have two beautiful, I have family, I have a beautiful two handsome kids. They're in college, and the difference is what I've learned, I'm able to pass on to them and let them know that there are other avenues. There are other things to do. This college life is something that you can do. You should do because it only enhances you. You can network. You can build something from it. But also having a family business, there's something else that you can do. You see the fruits of the labor. You see what it is that you can do this. There's just not one avenue that you have to go down. So and it's just a beautiful space and a beautiful place right now that, man,
Sounds like if I were to sum it up, the destination is not all. It's it's a journey. It's those little things in between the destination that teaches you so much.
yes,
It teaches you so much, and that is a great thing.
yes.
As we're getting close to wrapping, because we have another one coming up soon.
Mhm.
This was definitely, some eye opener, as far as, putting together our journey. We came from where we are, all the things in between, you know. And one of the things that I always try to say to people, it's what happened with the dot dot dot, not the two ends. Life
Facts,
happens in the middle, right?
facts,
And that's the beauty. That's where you learn the lessons. That's where you teach. That's where everything happens, and it is wonderful.
that, yes,
In closing, I just want to say, you know, thank you. Thank you for accepting the invitation for this podcast. It's something that we talked about for some time. We said it earlier that we wanted to share our stories, share our journey, because again, even if it only goes out there and our kids only see this, it's fine. We're not here for clicks. We don't believe in clicks.
Yes.
But if it teaches someone something, then, we've done something, so I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story. I'm sure I'm have to sneak it in and send a link to Jean so she can listen to it
It's all true. You can fact check it if you want. It's all true. You
because
fact check
I need
it.
her to add the check on those and say, yes, that happened. Yeah, it didn't happen that way.
Hey, yeah, that's. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you.
So, thank you very much for, sharing your stories, walking down memory lane with us. Our audience will definitely, want to hear this, and, it's going to teach them something. So, in closing, thank you for tuning into Conversation with Rad. Again, I am your host, and you may see this gentleman as a co-host one day, so
All right.
it's not far away. So again, thank you very much. Until next time, stay curious, keep the discussion going. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Love you all.
Take care.